My name is Jenna McWilliams, and I'm a second-year doctoral student in the Learning Sciences program at Indiana University. And I'm also a HASTAC scholar for the first time this year. This is my cat, Zoe. Say hi, Zoe. She is a 13-year-old and non-doctoral student who likes to sit in my lap when I do schoolwork and computer work. Something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is the issue of identity and identities in academic circles. And I've been thinking a lot about the way that I want to represent myself in the larger academic realm, not only as a learning scientist, as an educational researcher, and as a digital media researcher, and a social media researcher, and someone who cares about learning, but also as an academic who identifies as queer and genderqueer. And I am, as far as I know, the first openly gay student in my program at Indiana University. And I don't know of very many queer or genderqueer academics in my field. In fact, I don't know any personally, and I know of very few in my field. So I've had to do a lot of work thinking about what it means to be a queer researcher in learning sciences and in education in general. And I've had a lot of help with sort of new collectives in doing that. The big conference in my field is the American Educational Research Association annual meeting, which happens in April every year. And this year, I joined a special interest group called the Queer Studies Special Interest Group, and they have been working to establish gender-neutral bathrooms at AERA at the annual meeting in a way in an effort to not only make the genderqueer community have a safer space in this big conference environment, but also to make more public the issue of genderqueer. That's my cat, Lily. She really likes to jump across my computer. She's a kitten. And so I've been involved in that, and the way I've been involved is, it started when I received an email through the listserv that you join when you join this special interest group. But I asked the organizer of this effort if I could post the open letter that this group sent to the AERA governance committee about this issue to my blog, and I did that, and through that got involved in thinking about ways to represent these ideas to a broader audience more publicly and more socially. So does that count as a new collective? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've actually worked this issue out as a group, as an organization, as a group of people caring about these things. I'm not sure we have a sense yet of what new collectives actually are. I know how it feels to be part of a new collective, and I feel really lucky to have access to tools and resources that allow me to connect with other scholars who are thinking about the same things that I'm thinking about, and to be able to sort of create this crosshatch of identities that, for me, stick together, cohere in a really nice way, but might not look coherent to people outside of my headspace. And I think it's really important that we think about that as we think about learning in particular. So I worked with a group of students during the last academic year at an alternative high school that was local in my community, and the original reason I was there was to develop curricular interventions and assessments for the secondary English classroom, high school English classroom. This was a high school, an alternative high school, small high school. Partway through that effort, we got news that the school board was considering closing this school. And the students decided that they wanted to mobilize and try to save the school. And so we means, this is my kitten, Lily. Say hi, Lily. So we worked with the students to organize a set of protests and to help mobilize them around this issue. We being primarily the teachers and administrators at the school, but I helped in the ways that I felt I could be useful and that they felt I could be useful. So this organization, this work turned into a sort of a mix of traditional civic engagement activities and new media engagement activities. So students organized a petition drive to keep the school open. They organized protests outside of in the main square in town here, with signs and all of the traditional things that you're used to seeing and things like that. They also wrote speeches, short speeches, and presented them to the school board during the public comment period. And teachers worked with them to hone their public speaking skills for that context. It was you had, I think, 2 minutes to give your thoughts, something short, 2 minutes or 4 minutes or something like that. And students worked on having really good, sharp, crisp presentations of their ideas in that time. So those were some of the traditional things that students did. There was also a Facebook page, and we worked to develop a website to raise funds to keep the school open, and engaged in email drives and used social media to sort of spread the word about this issue. It ended up being the case that the school board did decide to close the school. And when that happened, we had to sort of change course and to work with kids to help them come to terms with the changes that were about to happen in their lives. Because for a lot of kids at this school, the school was their family and was their community. So the teachers had to help them find ways to get prepared for what was going to happen next. And what happened next for students was getting filtered into one of the mainstream big public high schools, or some of them decided to drop out of school and get a GED or be homeschooled. Some graduated early, or some graduated on time. And so lots of different things happened, and the community sort of dispersed. But what was really interesting was that we saw the students during this time developing a strong virtual community as the school was getting ready to disband, as the community was disbanding. And one thing that I found really interesting was that students continued to post to the Facebook walls of their former teachers at Aurora and their former principal to update them about what they were doing in their lives. And they would post short messages about studying for the GED exam, or what it was like to be in the other schools. And this was a way for the teachers and principal, the former teachers and principal at the school, to continue to support students in their learning in a really interesting way. And for a lot of students, that was really important to them, because they needed that support, that extra support, or at least wanted that extra support to continue doing the work that they needed to do to continue their education. So in terms of new collectives, I don't know necessarily that we can call that a collective, but I don't know why we wouldn't either. So it's not an organized thing, and it's not something that every student decided to do, but it's something that was made possible through new media resources and through the act of teachers and students friending each other on Facebook while they were in school. So in that way, the loose organization of support systems and the sort of just-in-time support that comes from the Facebook communications, the support that can happen when it's needed, as it's needed for students who need it, to me seems like an important feature of new collectives and new ways of thinking about community. So there's one thing that came out of that experience that I think is worth thinking about when we think about new collectives, especially for learning, which is that this collective that came out of this school was not required. It wasn't even really talked about in school. It wasn't something that teachers made and encouraged students to join. It was something that happened sort of organically, and was probably not even something that anyone ever talked about during the school day necessarily. So for me, the question is, how do we support new collectives in formal learning spaces when the new collectives are sort of anathema or they exist sort of in contradiction to, or in not opposition to, but in contrast to formal learning communities. Um, I don't think that requiring students to communicate with teachers on Facebook would have even worked, even if it had made sense. Um, in fact, it probably would have killed it. But because it wasn't required, students felt agency, and they felt that there was space for them to reach out when they needed to. I don't know what the answer is in terms of learning, but I know that this is an important question, something we need to talk about and think about as we start talking about this idea of new collectives in learning, digital media, and learning spaces.